Good evening. I'm just waiting on the cue to start. Now? Ready? Okay, good evening. I'm proud to welcome you all to our museum once again tonight, to Durant's lecture. I have a feeling that every one of you know who Durant is, but there may be some people who are watching on Facebook who do not know who he is. So Durant is our local historian. He's a battlefield preservationist, and he is doing lots and lots of good things for our county, for the history of our county, for this museum. We're always grateful for what he does for us, and he's making history come alive. So we're glad to have him here again tonight to talk about Elijah Clarke. How I can forget that, I don't know. There's just a couple things that I want to mention to you tonight about upcoming lectures. On Tuesday, May 27th, Ann Humphreys will be talking about Julia Mood Peterkin. She was a Pulitzer Prize-winning author who wrote the book Scarlet Sister Mary. And so we would love for you to come back to see that or tune into our Facebook page. On Tuesday, June the 10th, Durant will be talking again on...
I've got so much stuff going on, it's hard to say.
To be determined. Maybe I'll give him a topic. On Saturday, June the 14th, there will be a Juneteenth program here at the museum. And in June and July, I want to give you a heads up, we're going to be opening for those 2 months an exhibit in our traveling exhibit hall called From Cotton to Craft, the Story of South Carolina Textiles. And we have borrowed an exhibit from the South Carolina State Museum, but that's just going to be the background. It's sort of a general exhibit about textiles in South Carolina. We are going to highlight Laurens County and its textiles. Laurens County was super involved in the textile industry. My grandfather actually worked for Laurens Mill, and so I'm kind of connected to it and have a fondness for it. So you all come back to see that exhibit. And don't forget that in the coming months, as we lead up to our June of next year, July of next year, opening of our Revolutionary War exhibit, things will be changing here. We've pretty much decided that we have to change the floor plan. So things are going to be coming and going and disappearing. If you haven't gotten a chance to view our Martha Franks exhibit, please do so before it goes away, because it's still pretty fabulous. So again, welcome, Durant. Thank you for everything that you do for us.
Thank you, Teresa, and we appreciate everything you do as well. So can everybody hear okay? Good, thank you. So tonight we're talking about Elijah Clarke, and Elijah Clarke is Georgia's most famous patriot. Now here in South Carolina, we are blessed to have the triumvirate of the leading militia generals of the Revolutionary War, and that's Marion, Pickens, and Sumter. But Elijah Clarke is pretty darn close to being on equal footing with these fellas. So he, was involved in battle after battle after battle. He was quite a fighting man. When you read biographies of Elijah Clarke, you will read statements saying that he was born in Virginia and moved to Georgia. He migrated to Georgia. Well, he did, but before he did that, he migrated to South Carolina. And he migrated to South Carolina in 1755. This is right after the Treaty of the South. And so Elijah Clarke is regarded as the first settler in the Spartan district. He is referred to as Spartanburg's Daniel Boone. So he lived at Grindle Shoals, which was prime real estate. because if you wanted to go from Augusta to Philadelphia, you had to go through Grendel Shoals. And Grendel Shoals played a very important role in the American Revolution when that did occur. But from about the 1760s on, Elijah Clarke was in Georgia, and he was a leading Georgian while he was there in Wilkes County, Georgia, just over the Savannah River border. So here is a sketch of the many battles that Elijah Clarke fought in. And you can see how many of them are here in South Carolina. Just, battle after battle after battle. His first encounter occurred during the Cherokee War of 1776 in this area. So, while the Cherokee War was going on, while the South Carolina militia, the North Carolina militia, and the Virginia militia were attacking the Cherokee towns, Elijah Clarke was attacking the Cherokee towns in Georgia. And after that war was over, say November of 1776, there was a relative period of calm because of the quelling of the Cherokee influence. But there was continuing to be conflicts occurring at the same time. What happened after the Cherokee War in the backcountry of South Carolina was the Snow Campaign. And in the Snow Campaign, this is when Loyalist activity in the backcountry of South Carolina was quelled through the first siege of 96 and during the Battle of the Great Canebrake. The Loyalists in the backcountry had to go to ground. Many of them left. Some of them left to go north to fight with the British provincials in the north. Some of them went into Cherokee territory. Many of them went down to Florida. So throughout the discussion tonight, I'm going to be talking about a nemesis of Elijah Clarke. This is Thomas Brown. And I'm going to talk about an ally of Elijah Clarke. And this is James McCall. So one of the Loyalists who left from South Carolina, Georgia area and went down to Florida was Thomas Brown. Thomas Brown was a very formidable foe. Before the shooting really ever started, Thomas Brown was regarded as a Loyalist firebrand. He came over to America in, I can't remember if it's 1772 or 1774. He was granted, or he purchased 6,000 acres in the ceded territories ceded by the Creeks, and that would have been in this area here. He got 6,000 acres and he came over with 50 indentured servants. And he was a king's man, and he was a vocal king's man, to such an extent that the Sons of Liberty had enough of his haranguing, and they went and they attacked him. They hit him in the head with a rifle butt, gave him a concussion. He had a headache for the rest of his life. They tied him to a tree. They beat him about the head and body. They burned him with embers so severely that he lost 2 of his toes. And he was regarded or referred to as Burnfoot Brown thereafter. But I will tell you, if they knew what trouble then that Thomas Brown was going to be causing, they definitely would have ended his life at that time. So Thomas Brown goes down to Georgia, and he forms a Loyalist corps, the Florida Rangers, 300 men. And these rangers from East Florida, which remained a British colony throughout the war, they started raiding the plantations in Georgia, stealing cattle, committing all sorts of depredations. And so the folks in Georgia, they sent expeditions down into Florida. They sent 3 expeditions into Florida in 76, 77, and 78. And Elijah Clarke participated in all of these expeditions. The Patriot leaders in Georgia were quite a antagonistic bunch. They did not get along. As a matter of fact, there was a duel between 2 of the leading Loyalist military men. And this is Lachlan McIntosh and Button Gwinnett. And you all know of Gwinnett County in Georgia, named after Button Gwinnett. Lachlan McIntosh and Button Gwinnett had a duel, and McIntosh killed Gwinnett. So that just is an example of the discord that was going on in the Georgia ranks as these Florida expeditions were taking place. And all of these expeditions were unsuccessful. East Florida was a huge thorn in the side of the Patriot forces. During the 78 expedition, Elijah Clarke and his men were preparing to cross Alligator Creek Bridge when they were opposed by Thomas Brown on the other side. And Elijah Clarke was wounded in this battle. They had to retreat. That was the end of the 3rd expedition. But this was the beginning of the period when Thomas Brown and Elijah Clarke were shooting at each other. So after the snow campaign in backcountry of South Carolina, the Cherokees, they're quelled, to put it nicely. There was a period of calm in the Revolutionary War. For 2.5 years, there was very little activity in South Carolina. And that all changed on December the 30th of 1778 when Savannah fell. When Savannah fell, that was a huge blow to the Patriot forces. You know, we talk about Saratoga being the turning point in the war. And yes, it was. I mean, that's the #1 turning point. But as far as the turning point in the South is concerned, it's when Savannah fell. So now the British had a toehold in the South, and the entire landscape changed. And it was 15 months later before Charleston fell. But there was definitely activity going on between when Savannah fell and when Charleston fell. And one of those episodes of activity was when a Loyalist colonel in the backcountry named John Boyd started gathering forces. And he 600 to 700 men and coming through the backcountry. The general in Savannah was Augustine Prevost. His brother was named Mark Prevost. These are both very capable military officers. They were Swiss. Mark Prevost was going to Augusta and taking over, that town. That was as far as navigation could occur up the Savannah River. And that was the 2nd town in Georgia. There were only 2 towns in Georgia. So Mark Prevost goes up to Augusta, and he is there to meet what he thought would be 1,000 Creek Indians to fight with the British forces. Well, when he got there, the Creeks weren't there. They never showed up. But John Boyd now is coming down through South Carolina, and he's collecting Loyalists as he comes, and he's got 600 or 700, and he crosses the Savannah River. Well, he is being scouted and chased by Andrew Pickens and about 300 militiamen as Boyd is coming through. Boyd tried to cross at Vans Creek. There was a shootout. Robert Anderson, Patriot commander, now the Boyd's ranks were thinned by 100 men. So now he's got 600, and he's continuing on down to go to Augusta. And there was no communication between John Boyd and Mark Prevost. But as John Boyd comes down, Andrew Pickens is following behind. When Andrew Pickens catches up with John Boyd at a place called Kettle Creek. And Kettle Creek has got a pretty good defensive set up there. It's got a nice steep hill similar to Kings Mountain and flanked on both sides with Kettle Creek swamp and cane brakes. On the other side of Kettle Creek was half of John Boyd's force. And they had acquired 8 cattle. And this was 11 o'clock in the morning. They were slaughtering the cattle and serving them for breakfast. This is when Pickens comes up upon John Boyd and his men up on top of that hill. Elijah Clarke, with 60 or so mounted riflemen, is assigned to take the left flank and come in and cut off the Tories on top of the hill. And John Dooley is assigned to take the right flank. And so here they go, and Andrew Pickens charges straight towards that hill, up that easily defendable spot. Clarke and Dooley are stuck. That swamp, they can hardly get through that. So they were totally ineffective during this initial phase of the battle. And, you know, back and forth and back and forth, John Boyd gets wounded seriously, shot 3 times. And when John Boyd goes down, the Loyalist ranks break, and they start fleeing, and they start running across Kettle Creek. And at this time, Clarke breaks free, and he's able to come in behind the Loyalist men. And Dooley breaks free, and he comes behind. The Loyalists who were on the other side of the creek, they skedaddle. They start running, and they run all the way down to Augusta. So this is February 24th, 1779, when the Patriot forces under Andrew Pickens with Elijah Clarke and John Dooley win that significant battle at Kettle Creek. 300 Patriots defeat 600 Loyalists. So that was, you know, a well-earned battle. And that was appreciated. So, Charleston Falls, May the 12th, 1780. Today is May the 13th. Yesterday was the 245th anniversary of Charleston falling. And when Charleston falls, the British quickly set up posts at Georgetown, Camden, 96, and Augusta. And these posts at 96 and Augusta take primary importance in our story here tonight. So 95% of South Carolina was dominated when Charleston fell. The only pockets of resistance were Charles McDowell's camp on the North and South Carolina border, and Thomas Sumter's camp in the Catawba Reservation. Francis Marion wasn't on the scene yet. June the 6th, June the 12th, there are shooting incidents in Chester and Fairfield counties. Resistance is starting to rise up. The Loyalists at this time are going through the territory. They are dominant. And any Patriot home, they are plundering, if not burning. If it's a Loyalist home, they're foraging, but they're not plundering to the extent that they were in the backcountry of South Carolina. From this, from McDowell's camp, from July the 12th to July the 16th of 1780, there are 5 battles in 4 days that pushed British lines back 40 miles. So I'm not going to go into detail on those battles, but Fort Prince had to be abandoned as a result of what happened with those battles. Little small battles that the history books don't talk about, but when you put them all together, very significant. Also, on July the 12th, 1780, that's when William Bratton and his associates, militiamen, defeated Christian Huck, who was a Philadelphia lawyer provincial, and he was a bad guy. And the defeat of Christian Huck was superb. You know, that was a big blow. So, it was quite obvious that Cornwallis's goal was to subjugate South Carolina, and he was 95% there, and then take North Carolina, and then roll up Virginia, and just roll up the southern states. He already had Georgia. So, folks in North Carolina, now they're starting to get a little bit nervous because they know that they're next on Cornwallis's list. They're curious about what's going on. They're encouraged by what happens in July. The Over-Mountain men are encouraged. Isaac Shelby is encouraged about what he sees. And so he comes across the mountain. Isaac Shelby came into South Carolina 3 different times. The first time he came into McDowell's camp. And he's got 60 or 70 Over-Mountain men with him. He comes in on July the 25th, 1780. The next day, July the 26th, he rounds up 600 Patriot militiamen who are following him now from McDowell's camp, and I'm sure there's some of Sumter's men as well. And these 600 men surround Fort Thickety, which is guarded by 93 men, but well defended and a well ensconced fort with plenty of shot, powder, ammunition, extra muskets, everything else. And when Patrick Moore, the commander at Fort Thickety, looks out that morning and he sees 600 men arrayed against him with those Kentucky long rifles, he surrenders. He surrendered without firing a shot. And this is Isaac Shelby's first foray into South Carolina. At 96, Patrick Ferguson is stationed at 96. And he sees what's going on there. Fort Prince, which fell, was under his command. So he starts sending forays into Spartan District to try to confront what's going on with Isaac Shelby and the Over-Mountain men. And they do run into each other at Wofford's Iron Works. They have a running gun battle through Spartanburg County. In this battle, Elijah Clarke is struck across the neck and shoulders with a saber. A blow that would almost cut his head off. But fortunately, that blow caught the belt of his sword belt and saved his life. He wasn't he wasn't seriously wounded because 8 days after that, on August the 16th, he is in McDowell's camp, which at this time is on the Broad River. Isaac Shelby is in McDowell's camp. James Williams of the Little River Regiment, Lawrence County, he's in McDowell's camp. When they get word that there's 200 loyalists at Musgrove Mill. So when Shelby and when Clarke, and especially Clarke, this is Clarke, it's not that he never shied from a fight. He never saw a fight he didn't like, and I'm serious. This guy was aggressive as could be, admirably so. That's one reason he probably got wounded 3 times. But when Clarke, Shelby, and Williams got word that there was 200 loyalists at Musgrove Mill, they mounted up 200 men and rode 40 miles overnight to attack those 200. And when they got there that morning with their horses worn out, they found out that the Musgrove Mill garrison had been reinforced with 300 men under Alexander Ennis. And now there's 500 loyalists in their camp. This is Lawrence County right here. This is Spartanburg County. This is Union County. So Clarke, Williams, and Shelby come down and they find out, they realize that they have been discovered. There was some shooting early on that was not going to be a surprise attack, and they got the word that Ennis and his 300 men had showed up overnight. So now there was 500 men that these 200 men were going to attack. So what do? You can't turn around and go back home. Those horses are absolutely worn out. So what they did was they set up a quick defensive breastworks out of logs and branches and rocks and things like that. And they set up. Now they wanted to draw the loyalist forces into this trap they had set up with the breastworks. And at this point, the hero of Musgrove Mill, who was Captain Shadrach Inman from Georgia, he comes down and faints at the loyalist camp. He comes down, shouts at them a little bit, turns around and goes back, and they're still standing there. He charges again, says some mean things, but they just sit there and they don't charge. Third time he comes down, he says mean things about their mothers. So that really got under the skin of the loyalists, and they start chasing after Shadrach Inman. And they think that his 25 men or so is the Patriot force. And when they get 110 yards from the breastworks, all of a sudden they realized that that is where the Patriots are behind their defenses there. And they stop and they fire a volley, which was totally useless, went over everybody's head. Where this breastworks was set up was fronting an old Cherokee agricultural field. And it was rough terrain. It was gullies and hilly and stuff like that. And you could not maintain a constant line in situations like that. And so they into groups, and it was piecemeal in their attack. And they had wasted their shot from 110 yards. So now the Patriots are waiting behind the breastworks, and when the Loyalists get within 50 yards, they let loose a devastating volley. Andrew Ennis rallies his men. He starts to make progress on the Patriot right flank. As he does, he is shot in the neck at about this point, and he is unhorsed. And at that time, the Loyalists lose all cohesion, and they start running away. And now they're chased by the Patriots. Musgrove Mill was a significant victory. 63 Loyalists killed, 90 wounded, 75 captured. That really, they weren't a fighting force after that. So what happened on Musgrove Mill happened at a time that the South Carolina fortunes were at their lowest point. Now, I told you about Charleston falling, and that was the worst defeat in terms of men's loss and things like that in the American Revolution. But 2 days after, or 3 months after Charleston fell, now Horatio Gates and a Continental Army has coming down to confront Cornwallis, and they meet in Camden. And Horatio Gates' horrible battle strategy. Camden is an absolute disaster. I cannot emphasize how bad that loss was at Camden. Men throwing down their guns that are fully loaded, not even bothering to shoot before they throw the guns down and run away. And it's only because they ran through a swamp that they were able to get away, period. But 2 days after that, Thomas Sumter with 700 men is attacked by Banastre Carleton with 170 men. And Thomas Sumter is absolutely wiped out at the Battle of Fishing Creek. He went into that battle with 700 men, 300 prisoners, 50 British wagons that he had captured 3 days before, a herd of cattle, 300 cattle, a herd of sheep. He lost all that. He lost half his men, 350 men, all his prisoners and goods and all of that. So Thomas Sumter was severely beaten at Fishing Creek. And this is on the same day as Musgrove Mill. Musgrove Mill was a ray of hope for the Patriot forces. And I will say this, I've mentioned a couple of turning points. After Musgrove Mill, including Musgrove Mill, there were no setbacks to the Patriot forces after Musgrove Mill. We talk about Kings Mountain being a turning point is wonderful. Cowpens being a turning point. Neither one of those would have occurred if it wasn't for Musgrove Mill. No setbacks. I mean, there were some technical losses. No setbacks after the Battle of Musgrove Mill. And that's right here in Lawrence County. So Elijah Clarke was flushed with that victory. Now, I also mentioned an ally of Clarke, a brother in arms, James McCall. And James McCall fought with Elijah Clarke at Musgrove Mill. And one thing, you know, I've got a timeline here of Clarke's battles. And I was working on this timeline. All of a sudden it dawned on me, this is one battle after another. It's no longer he finishes one battle when he's on his way to fight another. So that's a quality about him that he had. I mean, he was wide open. Let's see where we are now. After Musgrove Mill, Clarke is flushed with victory. McCall is by his side. They decide that what they need to do now is take Augusta, which is a strongly fortified. Thomas Brown is the commander at Augusta. So a month later, September the 24th, I believe, Elijah Clarke is attacking Augusta. And this is a sketch or drawing that I got, just plucked it off the internet. It does show the battle, the first siege of Augusta. It's a little cartoonish, but it does get the point across. So what Clarke's plan was with Augusta was that they were going to have 3 different columns attacking right here, where the Loyalists and everything had a fairly substantial fort. There was a flaw to Fort Grierson, and this is Major Taylor over there was going to do on the left flank. As they're attacking Fort Grierson, Thomas Brown and his men feel like that cannot be defended, so they escape. The McKay's trading post. It's also referred to as the White House. And this is quite a distinctive spot right here in Augusta history. As Taylor is attacking on the left flank, he runs into Cherokees who had come down to receive gifts from Thomas Brown. Thomas Brown was held in such high regard by the British authorities that after John Stewart in Pensacola died of natural causes, he was the Indian agent, and that is a very important position, a very lucrative position. Thomas Brown was given that position of Indian agent. Now, agent to the Creeks, agent to the Cherokees. He is, one of his functions is to bestow gifts upon the Native Americans and, deal with their needs. And the Cherokees now are coming into Augusta for their annual gifts. And Clarke didn't expect that. So the Cherokees became important factors in what's going on here with the fighting around the McKay house. But at the same time that these days long, it was a 4-day siege, is going on, now the garrison at 96, under the command of John Harris Kruger, he was a very capable officer as well. He's the former mayor of New York City. His men are provincials. They are from New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, and so forth, down in the South, down at 96, fighting against Clarke and all the rest of them. And when Kruger and his force comes onto the scene, is the defeat of Clarke and McCall, and they have to retreat. They had about 30 wounded men that they had to leave behind. So there's some gruesome stories about the aftermath of the siege of Augusta. One of those stories, Thomas Brown was shot in both thighs during this battle. So he was bedridden. But as he is bedridden, so the story goes, 14 men, his enemies, probably people he knew, perhaps people who had broken their parole, and that's what he said. These men had promised not to fight anymore, and now here they are fighting in the first siege of Augusta. He hangs them from the balcony so that he can watch them die from his bedside as he's recuperating. But the rest of those men are now turned over to the Cherokees or the Creeks. I've heard either one. They're turned over to the Indians, and they are gruesomely tortured to death. But that's not where the story ends with the aftermath of the first siege of Augusta. After that siege was broken, after Clarke and McCall were defeated, the Loyalist forces, Thomas Brown, they went on a rampage through the backcountry of Georgia, burning houses, just plundering to no end. Thomas Waters is one of the leaders of this group that is burning 100 houses. You know, we had it bad here in the backcountry of South Carolina. There's no doubt this was a civil war. But what happened in Georgia is worse. And these people were just literally run out of the homes with just the shirts on their backs. Thomas Waters was a leading proponent of that. Also, Colonel Grierson, that's fort's named after him. Grierson and Waters really destroyed the backcountry of Georgia to such an extent that they had to leave. And where they left to was the mountains of North Carolina. You hear the mountains of North Carolina? I also hear that they went to the Watauga settlements, which is over the mountains, which is still the mountains of North Carolina, because Tennessee was North Carolina during this time. And I think this is where some of the confusion comes in about just exactly where they did go. So Elijah Clarke is escorting the Georgia refugees, 600 strong, mostly women and children. He's escorting them over the mountain. And while he's doing this is when the Battle of Kings Mountain occurred. Now, when Musgrove moved, this is going to emphasize how important that Musgrove Mill battle was, because Cornwallis was absolutely furious that he lost a battle like that. He was going to get retribution. He was going to show these patriots that wasn't going to cut it. So he sends a fellow named James Weems, W-E-M-Y-S-S. He sends him through the Shirals to make the Shirals holler. And as James Weems went through, in 50 miles, he burned 50 houses. Well, that was his eastern flank or his right flank. On his left flank, he sends Patrick Ferguson. And Patrick Ferguson's mission is to chastise the over mountain men. That's when he's sending them mean letters. If you don't submit, I'm going to hang your leaders and deal with fire and sword, to your lands. So Musgrove Mill started that ball in the working. Elijah Clarke gets his refugees where they're going to go, and now he comes back. Well, after Kings Mountain, the over mountain men went back over the mountain. The North Carolinians went to North Carolina. South Carolinians stayed, but McDowell's camp, is not here anymore. They've all gone home. But Sumter's camp is still here. So Elijah Clarke winds up with James McCall in Sumter's camp. And that's where they are. And Sumter now close to Cornwallis, because after Kings Mountain, Cornwallis had to give up North Carolina. He was in Charlotte. Now he has to retreat and reconquer South Carolina. He's got to worry about South Carolina all over again. So Cornwallis is in Winnsboro. Sumter is near the Catawba Valley. And they're both foraging. They're both attacking, capturing mills so they can get the flour and so forth. And they're running into the same mills. And there's competing with each other that way. So Cornwallis goes to Weems and says, hey, I need you to go after Sumter. So Sumter at this time is camped at Fish Dam Ford on the Broad River, and Weems is coming after him to attack him. Now, Sumter had some excellent colonels that fought with him, and one of the most excellent was a fellow named Thomas Taylor. And Thomas Taylor, as they went to bed that night, he was a little uneasy about the defensive situation. So he built up a bunch of bonfires down near the ford. And dug rifle pits. And he just kind of looked to see what was going to happen. And it so happened at that time, here comes James Weems coming to attack Sumter's camp. And he comes and he gets in front of those fires. Thomas Taylor and his men let loose a devastating volley. Weems and his men were defeated. Weems was wounded 2 or 3 times and captured. And when he was captured, he had in his coat pocket that list of 50 homes that he had burned. And Weems was taken to Sumter, and the list was presented to Sumter. And Sumter saw that list, and he threw it in the fire. This is one thing about Thomas Sumter, and I can say numerous bad things about him. Now, I can say a lot of good things about him. What I will definitely say is there are no reports of prisoner mistreatment with Thomas Sumter, and definitely none with Andrew Pickens. So, I mean, that's in the plus column for Thomas Sumter. He paroled Weems, and Weems was wounded. I believe he set out totally the rest of the war, but 10 years after the war, he moved to upstate New York and lived there happily ever after for the rest of his life. So the Battle of Fishing Creek, that was a significant victory. Clarke and McCall were there. At this time, Cornwallis is really fed up with Sumter. So he tells Marion. Marion was chasing Tarleton. Tarleton was chasing Marion at this time. And so Cornwallis has said, hey, you know, forget Marion. I need you to take care of Sumter. And this is when Marion says, fine, even the devil himself couldn't catch that damned old fox. And Banastre Tarleton is the one that gave Francis Marion his nickname, the Swamp Fox. So now Tarleton is after Sumter. Remember, he whipped him big time at Fishing Creek. And Sumter starts to retreat. And he's retreating back to a place that his men knew of. He wasn't familiar with this territory, but he was coming down to the Tiger River, to a place called Blackstock's Farm. And here's a sketch of the farm at Blackstock's. You see these heavy lines right here? Those are Farmer Blackstock's fences. He had perhaps the most extensive fencing system of anybody in the back country. There were whole logs laid down and stacked high. When I first was looking at this, I was thinking, oh, okay, he kept cattle and horses inside those fences. That wasn't it at all. Those were agricultural fields growing corn and peas and stuff like that. His fences were so high, the deer couldn't jump over them. This is how substantial they were. This is the lane coming up. This is the road. This is the Colonial Road coming to a ford over the Tiger River. Blackstock's is my second favorite battlefield, by the way. A lot of moving parts here, and I'm just going to go over it quick. But 3 hills on the Blackstock plantation. Home place, which is a stout, heavy, thick log, 2-story building. There was a building here. We don't know what it was. I think it was a store. There was a hill here. This is where the family graveyard was, and there's monuments here now, Monument Hill. Tarleton attacks this time. He whipped Sumter good with 170 men at Fishing Creek. Now he's got 270 men. So he really thinks he's going to be doing something now. Of course, Thomas Sumter had 1,000 men. He had 10 colonels here with 100 men each. And he arrayed along these hills here. And Tarleton is coming right into the teeth of Sumter's defenses. This is where Sumter commanded the battle from. In action was the 63rd Regiment, led by John Money, a detachment of the 63rd. They come across this field. They're starting to make progress. They're opposed by Twiggs. Twiggs is being pushed back. The 63rd charges with bayonets down. Sumter sends wind around to counteract the 63rd, and they do stymie them there. But the 63rd continues on until they get in range of the sharpshooters in the house, in the home here, 2 stories high. And so the sharpshooters just decimate what's going on with the 63rd Regiment. They shoot 23-year-old Major John Money, who is their leader, favorite of Cornwallis's, and Money is left on the field. The bravest thing Tarleton did during the entire war was when he drove his horse onto the field here, being shot at the whole time, picked John Money up, put him on his horse, and they ran back off the field. But Money did die later. But that was a brave act on Banastre Tarleton's part. After the 63rd was stymied, the battalion of the 71st charges forward. And they're moving through here. And they're watching what's happening over there. And as they're watching, they don't realize that Lacey is over here with 100 men in the woods, hidden, out of sight. 71st has no idea that they're there. And when Lacey and his men let loose with a volley, that just decimates the 71st. So now at this point, Tarleton's lost the 63rd, he's lost the 71st. He has one option left, and that's the British Legion, the mounted British Legion. And Tarleton does what Tarleton does. He charges, and he charges right down this lane here, right? That's bordered on either side with 8 to 10 foot tall fences, impenetrable. And he charges through this lane here, the first horse gets shot. And as the shooting continues, the last horse gets shot. And now these men are totally trapped in this lane. When you go to the Black Stocks battlefield, you can see this lane to this day. That is a bloody, deadly lane. Out of the 270 men that Tarleton had, 93 were killed and 100 wounded. And Tarleton declared victory. But anyway, he declared victory because there were 4 patriots killed during this battle. There were several wounded. And one of those wounded was Thomas Sumter, as at the end of the day, and this battle started at 4 o'clock on November the 20th, so it got dark early. And he goes down to position the British forces at the end of the battle, and he got too close. And he got shot with a load of buckshot that went through his right shoulder. One pellet lodged on his spine, and he was out of the war for about the next 4 months. Couldn't really write as a result of that. So what Clarke did during this battle, I almost forgot that part, but he played an important role. And he was given the orders by Sumter to go around the right flank, and this map is very much out of scale, but to follow the river, go along the right flank, and attack the British from behind. That was the plan. When Clarke got there, all of a sudden he found the British horses. They were corralled at a spot back here, so he captured the horses. But as he was doing that, all the survivors were fleeing from the field, and Clarke had an interaction of fighting a battle with them. And some of the horses were recuperated, but he stole others, and he was, a major thorn in the side after the Battle of Blackstocks. So after the Blackstocks, there were 5 regiments, half the force of Blackstocks, that, left to go home. That's what these people did after a battle. They signed up for 60 days, and their commanders knew on day 58, if we hadn't done anything by now, we better do something. And so they would fight a battle. That's why Shelby attacked Musgrove Mills, because 2 days later his men were supposed to go home. Well, the Georgians under Twiggs, John Twiggs, Benjamin Few, and Elijah Clarke. And John Twiggs, both Twiggs and Few were senior to Clarke. I'm not quite sure exactly how that turned out. John Twiggs was second in command at the Battle of Blackstocks, and when Sumter was wounded, John Twiggs took over. And that night after the battle, John Twiggs wisely decided to retreat, and that meant that Tarleton held the field, and so that's one of the reasons that he claimed victory. But Clarke, McCall, Twiggs, Few, who did I leave out? Anyway, 5 of those regiments with underneath Hammond, Samuel Hammond, underneath those 5 colonels started coming back, and it's my contention they were just going home to Georgia. I've read that they were in the area foraging, which they were to me as they went home. They got word that there was a fort, a loyalist fort on the Saluda River at a place called Hoyle's Old Place, which is exactly where Piedmont, South Carolina is. So these 5 colonels head towards Hoyle's Old Place. And apparently, and there was a ford across the Saluda there, but I believe that the Patriots cut off that access to the ford, and now the Loyalists had to start retreating. We don't know who these Loyalists were. We don't know how many they were. Hardly any information about them. So, as these Loyalists are retreated, they're coming down the north side of the Saluda to the next ford, which is 18 miles away. And where they get to that ford is Rutledge Ford. And it's the ford between Abbeville and Lawrence counties. Everybody's in Lawrence County till they get down to Rutledge Ford, and then the Loyalists cross over. And it's at that point that the Patriots catch up with them. And there's a shooting battle between the two. And that's when Captain Hatcher is killed. There were 4 or 5 killed on each side. Now, I've been studying these Loyalists closely. And I'm not going to go into all the details trying to figure out who they are. I know who they were. The next morning, the Loyalists were gone. And so now Clarke and Hammond and McCall and Few and Twiggs are able to cross over into Abbeville County. Lo and behold, Andrew Pickens' home place is plundered. Now, this time, Andrew Pickens had given his parole. And say he laid down his arms. He said, I was not going to fight anymore if you protect me. Security and protection was the #1 issue in the backcountry. And Andrew Pickens wanted it, and he was promised it. And somehow, his home gets plundered. His family is abused. James McCall, his neighbor, his home place is totally destroyed. Who did that? History doesn't say. I know, though. But anyway, a week after that, there is the Battle of Long Canes. And again, all these patriots are foraging. Now, John Twiggs is not here. He's gone back to Georgia, and that's my contention. They were all going back to Georgia. So, Clarke and McCall, with about 200 men, or 100 men, are separated from the main group under Few with about 300 men. This is in, well, we don't exactly know where this happened. Greenwood, McCormick County, that area. So, Clarke and McCall are separated from the other group of 300 men when they run into a patrol from 96 consisting of about 300 men. And Clarke and McCall are absolutely overwhelmed. Kruger sends additional help from 96. And so I think Ivan Allen was the leader of the Loyalist provincials, who were the New York soldiers fighting for the British, and the South Carolina Loyalist militia under the command of Robert Cunningham, Lawrence County's Robert Cunningham, Lawrence County's General Robert Cunningham. So we know that Robert Cunningham was at Long Canes, where Clarke and McCall were defeated. And Clarke was wounded severely, so bad that they thought he was dead. McCall got wounded, but he quickly recovered. So I will mention a sentence that seems to be lost to history. When John Harris Kruger wrote to Cornwallis about what happened at the Battle of Long Canes. And this is 4 days after that battle occurred. And what Kruger says to Cornwallis is, I have desired the militia to scour the country. Who's the militia? Robert Cunningham, the General Robert Cunningham. He's the militia. I have desired the militia to scour the country. Well, 2 weeks after this, the Fair Forest District's being plundered. Now, the brass, William Washington, Daniel Morgan, Nathaniel Greene, it's Thomas Waters. He destroyed Georgia. Now he's destroying the Fair Forest District. We got to send William Washington after him so he can kill him at Hammond's Old Store, 10 miles from here. Well, all of that's what happened, but it wasn't Thomas Waters. It was Robert Cunningham. It was the Little River Loyalist Militia, along with the Spartan Loyalist Militia, the Newberry Loyalist Militia. All these guys based out of 96, they are the ones who are scouring the country on John Harris Kruger's orders. And that's how the Battle of Hammond's Old Store occurred. This is where James McCall is such an absolute hero when he leads 200 mounted riflemen with William Washington and his 80 3rd Continental Light Dragoons into the Battle of Hammond's Old Store. Elijah Clarke is seriously wounded. He's recovering from his wounds. So he was not at Hammond's Old Store. He was not at Cowpens. He was worried. He was wounded. Elijah Clarke, as many battles as he fought in, he did not fight at Kings Mountain or Cowpens for 2 different reasons. Excuse me. So after Cowpens, that great victory, Greene takes off on the race to the Dan, going up north. Cornwallis is following. Clarke is recuperating. And the Battle of Guilford Courthouse occurs in February of 1781. And now the Patriot forces come back. Andrew Pickens comes back because there's chaos in the backcountry with his absence. And there's a fella who's causing a lot of trouble in the backcountry. This fella by the name of James Dunlop. And he was based out of 96, and he was an enforcer. He was a bad guy. He was a very bad guy. He was out leading a foraging party when Clarke and McCall catch up to him. Dunlop's got about 75 men. Clarke and McCall have about 200, I believe. They did outnumber the Loyalists here. They're coming down this way, and they see the Loyalist forces at a muster ground. And that's when they let loose and, just really shoot these guys up pretty bad. Until they were so shot up, they had to retreat as best they can. And they retreated. This is in Abbeville County. This is in Donalds, 25 miles from here in Abbeville County. This is one of the newest discovered battlefields in the United States. It was just found 4 years ago with the field research team of the South Carolina Battleground Trust. So Dunlop and his men retreat to the home of Samuel, can't remember his last name. Anyway, Samuel Hill. And there it is right there. And again, they're shot up. Samuel Hill, he gets shot through the arm. He gets shot into his body, and he's laying on the floor, and they think he's dead. And he gets his arm amputated, and he goes back to England and lives happily ever after from that. But James Dunlop is wounded during this battle. Half of the Loyalists were killed or captured. They were all captured. Half of them were killed or wounded. The other half was captured. And that was, a significant victory. James Dunlop is taken up towards the prison camps in Virginia. He's wounded. He had been wounded before. and he's up in Gilberttown where he had been before with Ferguson when Ferguson was up causing so much trouble up in North Carolina. This is between Rutherfordton and Morganton, Gilberttown. And that evening, Dunlop was a suspect in the disappearance of Mary McCrae, who was 18 years old, who spurned his advances, and she was never seen again. So he was not a very popular fellow in Gilberttown. And as he was wounded, laying in his bed, somebody burst through the door at midnight and leveled a pistol at him and shot him. And 5 minutes later, they came back to make sure he was dead. And he wasn't dead, so they shot him again. The next day, it was time to take the prisoners back to Virginia. And as they were doing that, they looked at Dunlop, and damn if he wasn't still alive. So a over-mountain man named Carr loaded up a rifle with extra powder. He went up to the bedroom, and he blasted Dunlop through the body. And that was the end of James Dunlop. Thankfully, he's gone. This is what the Battleground Trust found as they were studying the field at Dunlop's defeat. And the main battle occurred. This is where the battle began. And this is where the muster field was. Represent shotgun pellets, rifle balls, musket balls, buttons, buckles, things of that nature, things that you find on a battlefield. And this is the point that they retreated to, Samuel Hill's home. And this is, well, actually Samuel Hill's home is right here. Found a bunch of artifacts at this point. Nothing at this point because now that spot where Samuel Hill's house was is a mechanic shop with, disabled cars all around it. And 10,000 nuts, bolts, and screws all across so you just cannot find what was there. But this is an interesting thing. This is in Donald's. This is just a little ways away from us. So, after Dunlop's defeat, after Greene comes back into South Carolina, he attacks at Hobkirk's Hill. And it was a tactical defeat, but a strategic victory. It was not a setback. Rawdon held the field, but Rawdon realized he had to retreat. And Greene is wanting to put the pressure on, and at this time he assigns Light Horse Harry Lee to join up with Francis Marion for the second time. And they start working together. And because Camden had been abandoned, now the communication posts were exposed that the British had, because you just can't go from Charleston to Camden. You had to go through a series of forts to get from one place to another. Fort Watson is vulnerable. Lee and Marion take Fort Watson. Fort Mott is besieged. Lee and Marion take Fort Mott. Greene, at this time, has his sights on 96. So he starts heading this way, and he tells Lee to come join him. He tells Lee to join up with Andrew Pickens at Augusta. But also in the field, in the play, is Elijah Clarke. And Elijah Clarke is now operating in this area here. And he's picked a spot called Beach Island on the Savannah, was where the Savannah narrows. It's the narrowest part of the Savannah, where it is susceptible to rifle fire. And the British are sending supplies up to Augusta. And Clarke and his men prevent them from going forward. So the supply boat turns around, boats turn around, and they come back to Fort Galphin. It's right here. And at this point, Clarke and Light Horse Harry Lee have joined up. And now they're going to attack Fort Galphin, which is on the Savannah River. And it is where the supply boats sought refuge. They had harbored there, so good supplies there. Clarke and his men approached the gates at Fort Galphin, make a demonstration, shoot them up and everything, and retreat. Oh, can't do anything here, we're going to retreat. And as they retreat, the entire garrison from Fort Galphin comes out after them and leaves the gates open. And Light Horse Harry Lee just waltzes right in behind them. So Light Horse Larry Lee was a fort-busting son of a bitch. He took Fort Watson, Fort Mott, Fort Galphin, Fort Granby, and later on, Fort Cornwallis and Fort Grierson, and the Holmes Redoubt at 96. All of these involved Light Horse Harry Lee, working with Marion, Clarke, Pickens, Greene. Pretty good accomplishments there. So Fort Galphin falls, and now Pickens and Lee and Clarke have joined forces for the second siege of 96. And while they're there, Augusta is defended by two forts, Fort Grierson and Fort Cornwallis. And Colonel Grierson was commanding this was probably a fortified home place of his. Fort Grierson had a flaw. And that flaw was that there was a ravine that came up to within about 25 feet of that fort. So Pickens and his men, Lee, they come up that ravine and then they charge the fort and they take the fort. And they take Grierson prisoner and he's wounded and he's laid up in bed. So now they besiege Fort Cornwallis and they capture cannons at Grierson, plus Light Horse Harry Lee has got a 6-pounder he's been hauling all over the country all this time. And Fort Cornwallis is very secure. Can't hardly do anything. So what they decide to do is build a Mayhem Tower, which is what won at Fort Watson and is what Greene and Kosciuszko decided to do at Fort 96. So a Mayhem Tower is like Lincoln logs stacked up, 20, 30 feet tall. So you can gain a height advantage over your enemy. And I believe what they did was they built this tower behind a house so they couldn't see. So Thomas Brown, who was the commander fighting against Clarke, Thomas Brown and his men can't tell what's going on. So they build the tower and then they tear the house down. And so now, and they haul the 6-pound cannon up into the top of that. And now they're shooting down on Fort Cornwallis with that 6-pound cannon. Thomas Brown's artillery is disabled. He knew that he couldn't do anything, so Thomas Brown surrendered. And you just can't imagine that he wasn't murdered on sight, but he wasn't, and he was under Andrew Pickens' protection. And Andrew Pickens paroled him, made him promise not to fight anymore, and he went down to Savannah where he served out the rest of the war. After the war, he went to the Caribbean where he had a plantation with 600 slaves. He was industrious. So that's what happened at Augusta. So after this point, Clarke did not go to the siege of 96. Pickens and Lee did. A week after they showed up, Lord Rawdon broke the siege and Greene had to retreat. But Clarke was active in Georgia, but there weren't a lot of battles until, very late in the war, when Elijah Clarke went on a third Cherokee expedition, and early in 1782, there were Cherokee excursions during that time, and that was his last involvement in the American Revolution. But Elijah Clarke's military career did not end there, and after the war, Elijah Clarke became a general in the French army. France made him a general so he could raise an army and kick the Spanish out of Florida. And Elijah Clarke thought that was a great idea. But George Washington persuaded him not to do that. Now, I don't know if they had any relationship at all, or George Washington just wrote him a letter or something like that. But that was a short-lived enterprise, to say the least. But that wasn't the end of Clarke's activities. He also thought it would be a good idea if in western Georgia, in a similar fashion to what John Sevier did in Tennessee, if he didn't think it was a good idea to set up an independent state in the western realms of Georgia, which is, what is that, sedition or something like that? Treason? I don't know, it's not good. And George Washington convinced him that that wasn't a good idea. So he gave that up. And he lived till 1799. I hope I've been able to convey a sense of some of the activity of Elijah Clarke. His fighting spirit, his aggressiveness, his ability to get things done. We owe a real tribute to Elijah Clarke, because he did some good things as far as military-wise in the war is concerned. He really helped our cause. One of the reasons, I didn't mention this, one of the reasons that Patrick Ferguson retreated from Cane Creek and Gilberttown, where he was for about 30 days. That's when James Dunlop did his things with Mary McRae. Ferguson knew that there was about 1,000 men being raised against him at Sycamore Shoals over the mountains. But he also knew that Clarke was on his backside there with 600. And Ferguson thought they were 600 men that were fighting men, but they weren't. They were mostly women and children. But Ferguson was so worried about Clarke and Shelby and Sevier, that's when he started retreating. So another point on how influential he was. Does anybody have any questions at this time? Yes.
Hold on. I'm going to ask that you talk into the microphone so that the people who are viewing from Facebook or YouTube can hear the question. And you really need to talk straight into the microphone.
Was that a Clarke with an E or without an E?
With an E. How about your last name? With an E? Are you a descendant? No. You could be. You look like it. Any other questions? Well, I guess I've covered all the ground.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you.
Enjoyed it.
Appreciate it.